All right, welcome everybody. This is our webinar, part of the series on how to help parents better help their kids. I'm Samantha Moe, certified parenting coach and creator of Mad to Glad Blueprint. Today's webinar is on simple tools to support the overwhelmed parent. If you were with us yesterday, you heard my co-host tonight, Sonia Story. You heard her and I, and she's the developer of the Brain and Sensory Foundations course. You heard her talking about neurodevelopmental movements and movements that can calm the fight or flight, stress response and sensory behaviors. I didn't get that title exactly right. And so tonight what we're doing is we're flipping the mic. So I know that Sonia works with a lot of educators and practitioners, and a lot of you are parents as well. So we thought, well, let's talk about how to talk to parents in a way when their kids are enrolled in different programming that is sensitive and helps parents to feel on board instead of feeling overwhelmed. So the way that this conversation is going to work is Sonia's going to take the lead and ask me some questions and interject her wisdom as we riff here together. And the first half of this 1 hour call or so will be us, Sonia and I chatting. So please keep your audio on mute. And you can type questions in the chat box as we go along. And in the last half, we will invite you to unmute and we'll talk about whatever feels appropriate and is coming up for you. So Sonia, welcome back. Thank you for flipping the mic with me today.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Thank you, Samantha. And if I may, I would love to give an introduction because I know a lot of souls here will probably already know who you are, but some won't. So let me start with an introduction, and thanks for setting this up. I'm super excited to hear what you have to say. So Samantha, as she already said, is a certified parent coach, and she has coached parents on how to help their children calm, connect, and cooperate since 2004. She's now providing continuing education and advanced training for parent coach certification. And that's for family service professionals who want to support parents who are supporting intense kids and their families. So Samantha created the Mad to Glad Blueprint, which is a revolutionary brain and nervous system based approach to positive communication and parenting that works to soothe and even preempt the most challenging behaviors that we see in intense kids. So Samantha holds a master's degree in communication disorders from the University of Minnesota. And she has, in addition to having training as a speech language pathologist, she also has training in sensory integration, play therapy, and emotional regulation. So thanks for setting up this webinar series, Samantha. I'm super excited to hear from you. And I think the first question is, who do you feel would benefit the most from listening to the webinar? And how did you, how do you feel you could, what do you feel like you can offer, particularly for practitioners and also for parents?
Yeah, thank you for that. So, this webinar, when we sat down and talked about what are the things that practitioners struggle with in the work that we do. A lot of us are very mission and purpose driven, and so we want to make a difference in the lives of children and families. Mm-hmm. And so being somebody who started working with children with autism back in 2004 and has gone through the evolution in my professional journey, I was the practitioner who was frustrated with parents who, like at the lunch table, I'd be like, I can't get them on board. This parent wants me to fix their kid. So if you're a professional who's had those thoughts of frustration, like you want to push the boulder up the hill in a way that feels more simple, or you even just want to have a more fluid and graceful way of interacting with parents, that's less about fixing and more about guiding. Because you love children and you could benefit from concrete tools for talking to parents, that's a good match for if you're on the webinar tonight.
Mm-hmm. Great, excellent. And then So I know you struggled yourself in your practice with how to connect with parents in order to better help their children. And tell us about your journey from starting as a speech language pathologist and then autism specialist and then certified parent coach. Like how did that all that happen?
Yeah, I vividly remember about 7 years into my journey as a speech language pathologist, where I was working at an outpatient pediatric clinic. And there was a little boy who was 5 years old named Drew. And Drew was a nonverbal child with autism. I do some play-based speech therapy lessons with him. And I thought I had this really wonderful idea of how exactly the dad who brought him in each week could play with him and stimulate language and try some of these sensory activities in addition that I had learned from my good colleague and friend who was the OT at the clinic. But I remember one day when dad came in, his child had kind of plateaued in the speech therapy work that we were doing. I was surprised to see it because the child could connect really well with me and express himself verbally, but not so. Dad wasn't seeing those changes at home. And thank goodness this dad was really honest with me. He looked at me one day because I just said, like, what's happening with the home program or some of these strategies I'm suggesting for you? Like, what's really happening? And he said, to be honest with you, Samantha, I have a chronic inflammatory condition, which
Oh, wow.
not only makes it difficult for me to do some of these strategies that you're doing, but I have two other kids. And so when we're done with speech therapy, I go to the grocery store so that I can make dinner and get it on the table on time to feed all three of my children. And I really just don't have that. I don't have the time to engage my child. And it was heartbreaking because I loved his child. I knew he loved his child. But what I didn't know was what exactly did this parent need so that he could take baby steps of action that would still help his child progress and thrive in a way that didn't disrupt the entire family. And in fact, it really, when we talk about like neurodiversity and neurodivergence now, in fact, it like encompassed it so that the whole family could really thrive. So for me, I feel like if you're a practitioner on the call and you know what it feels like if a family or a child has plateaued, I think there's some other signs that help you to recognize that you could use some more tools to talk to parents to engage them in a different way. And we'll talk about those tools later today. And I'll just share one more thing. Some of the feelings that can bring you to this space is that feeling of frustration or that feeling of, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this if it's outside my scope of practice.
Right.
You might just be feeling worried, like, is this something that I'm allowed to say or not?
Great. That's wonderful. And then I just wanted to point out to parents on the call or listening to the recording that Samantha's going to share also, related to your specific needs and concerns. And so I feel like this whole subject is really super important and positive for all of us to learn, just as how are we relating? How are the things that we're saying landing with somebody else? How's my mission? How's my mission doing, and how is my goal happening? Like, is it happening? And how is my communication coming across? And can I make it better? So I really appreciate this focus a lot. And I know that you're going to be teaching 3 essential skills to talk to parents about sensitive topics. So what are they? And I don't know if this applies, but one thing I'm wondering is, like, sometimes when I'm struggling as a parent, I like to talk to myself, because then I seem to do better if I talk to myself and just go, okay, Sonia, this is new. I haven't been in this situation before. I'm doing my best here. So maybe like, I'm curious if your skills would also help parents to talk to themselves. So you can speak to that and let us know your 3 essential skills.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So parents for sure learn how to talk to themselves differently. If when you learn some tools to help parents really see their child differently, so rather than them seeing their kid as a child who's defiant or misbehaving, you know you're on the right track when a parent comes to you and they say, "Oh, I get it. He has an overactive fight or flight response." Like they say something kind of geeky like that, like the way that we talk, like, "Oh, I get it. He's not trying to be defiant. It's that
Right.
he can't help it. It's not that he
Right.
won't do it. It's that he can't do it."
Right.
So that's how you know you're on the right track. And so to speak to some of these skills for us visual learners, I'll pull up this slide here and let me put it in the right viewing mode. So when we're learning how to talk to parents, there's a lot of who's talking to who going on, like, and how do we do it better, right? So as a practitioner, am I coming from a loving and grounded place? Can we model positive communication when we're interacting with the children? Can we hold that loving place when we're talking to parents? And if we want to engage parents in partnership so that they're willing to see, like, oh, maybe some of what's happening with, like Sonia, yesterday we were talking about how kids have hypersensitivities or hyperactivity, symptoms of anxiety or hard time sitting still or ADHD, like some of these different terms that we use. If you want to be able to really engage a parent at recognizing how they can better support their child, the first skill is you understanding what's beneath their child's challenging behavior. So when I became a certified parent coach in 2012 is when I completed that program. The program was really lovely, but it talked about theory. It talked about what's happening in the family dynamic if somebody has adopted a child. What might be happening in the brain wiring if a child has this alphabet soup of diagnosis? And there wasn't an actual step-by-step parenting practice. So when I was a certified parent coach, I had a family sitting in front of me and they're like, but what exactly do I do to discipline my child who has ADHD? And by the way, I have 2 other kids at home, right?
Right.
So the first skill when we're working with families and we're trying to guide them towards more peaceful connection at home, it's you being really skillful at understanding what's beneath their child's challenging behavior. So the way that I could actually just go right onto this next slide, I talk to parents a lot about this model from Dr. Daniel Siegel about the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain. That's my first conversation. If I'm doing a consultation with a parent, and often multiple times throughout the parent coaching program, is we reference that any behavior you're seeing means the downstairs brain is activated because that's fight, flight, or freeze. And if you're coming to see me, because my specialty with the Mad to Glad Blueprint is working with families who have more emotionally intense kids, it's more likely your child has a fight response rather than this freeze response. Like, because then they're standing out in their home environment as having outbursts and such. And we want to contrast that with the upstairs brain of problem solving, paying attention, and managing behavior. Because adults, if we're over the age of mid-20s or 30s, our upstairs and downstairs brain may be communicating better than a child, right? And so we say, Johnny, what could you do better next time rather than throwing that block at your brother's head? Or, hey, look at me when I'm talking to you. Or, hey, remember that breathing technique of like take 5 breathing? And we show them how you trace your fingers and the child can't implement it in the moment. Well, that's because the downstairs brain is running the show. And so this if you've worked in the realm of sensory integration or somatic experiencing, neurodevelopmental movements, primitive reflexes, we know that this downstairs brain and the brainstem, there's like this disruption with how the rest of the brain is communicating. But that can be really complex sometimes for parents to understand. So when I'm trying to engage a parent who's overwhelmed and quite frankly, feeling frustrated, maybe not liking parenting, maybe feeling guilty for the way that they are parenting, I like to just boil it down and say, you know what? There's a fire in your child's brain. And so while you're doing your program, your speech therapy program, your play program, your movement program, as a parent, there's a way of helping your child feel calm from the inside out, like those programs we're talking about, help the body feel calm inside, and that will resonate and radiate outwards. but there's ways you show up in the environment. And if you as the parent are the environment and they're picking up on calm in your body and your brain, now the mirror neurons are kicking in. And now from the outside in, it's helping them calm. And you have the benefit now of having a harmonious relationship with your child as well. So the skills that parents need to understand is truly what's beneath their child's challenging behavior. So when we can break it down and articulate it, it starts giving that, if we can say something like there's fire in the brain, well, now this little 5-year-old Drew, who melts down at home and his dad's looking at him on the kitchen floor like, oh, you're just like slowing everything down. I'm trying to get you fed. I'm trying to do a good job here. Now, instead of the dad feeling angry, I mean, he might still feel angry. He might feel triggered, but he might look at his child and he say, okay, my next step is to figure out how to help you calm the fire in the brain. And it starts giving parents a new way to interact with their child. The second skill is, so when, on my parent coaching journey, when I learned this and created my 8-week step-by-step program, I'm helping parents understand, like, here's how you calm fire, here's how you integrate emotional brain, here's the language you use. Here are ways of communicating with your tone, with your body language, so you don't trigger more fire in the brain just by being bigger than them. Like everything's linked to like fire in the brain versus calming the fire. I found that parents would come in and still feel overwhelmed. And I was like, really? Because I broke this down and articulated it really simply. What's happening here? So I went through a 6-month life coaching intensive program, training program. And I started realizing, oh, we don't as practitioners just need to know the right tool and what's happening with kids and be really skillful there. We need to understand the emotional baggage that the parent is carrying. And so pulling some life coaching skills into your conversations makes a really big difference, because now when dad is looking at his 5-year-old melting down on the floor, my first question is, so how did that feel for you? And my second question is always, and what did you do next? Not as a way of judging them, but as a way of understanding and letting them really process through. I stayed calm until. I kept my cool until. This is really my breaking point. I did a good job until. And so when you begin understanding the parent's individual triggers, and some parents trigger because the narrative in their head becomes, it can be unhelpful and fear-based. If I don't fix this or get this under control, my kid's going to end up in jail someday. Or if this keeps happening and we go in public, even if the kid does okay in public, and somebody sees it, they're going to judge me because that means I'm being a bad parent. So really beginning to understand without judgment that in the same way the child's brain is flooded in those moments because of mirror neurons, the same system is activated in the parent. Are you activating fight, flight, or freeze, or being activated more in like the fight where the parent is aggressive back? Do they flight and they just like, I got to get out of here? Do they freeze and now they have really permissive and soft boundaries? So you might give them a really good piece of information like, okay, so when it comes to positive discipline, we're going to have our 3 rules. This is exactly how we're going to follow up, and keep it really simple so that this little scientist in your child's brain learns the rules apply to me and they develop self-control. But if you talk about that and you completely bypass the understanding that this parent is, when they're holding up the boundary, they're having a fight response. So they're like, you got to do it this way. These are our rules. You now see this whole family system, right? Oh, it's not just about a great tool of how to hold a boundary or teach positive discipline and help kids understand that that the rules do apply to them. It's understanding and guiding the parent how to work through their own reaction. So this can be, I was talking to a couple this morning and they were talking about their 4-year-old and dad is calm until, and we started talking about like, okay, so if your boundary is not giving in on this certain thing, and I don't believe in point blank statements like never give in, it reinforces the child. No, it has to be customized to the family. So with this dad, I was saying, so it sounds like what you're practicing during this moment when your heart is racing and your child is screaming, but you're both sitting next to each other and you're the one using the fidget popper rather than your child. It sounds like it could be helpful for you to say, I'm here, breathe, I'm safe, this is hard. There's some of this language that this dad, and he welled up with tears. Why? Because he did not get that at 4 years old. So when you understand the parent and you guide them, they're not just parenting their kid from this place of their fight or flight stress response, they're parenting themselves through that. And that kind of parenting becomes so much easier. And now they're not like, change because your approach is wrong, because there's already enough vulnerability and guilt and shame and parenting. It's more like, I see it, this feels better. And so you learn how to talk to parent. So this is the third skill is, so how do you talk to parents about both? Because if you want to engage them in change, then you need to know how to talk about their kids' behavior, guide them through recognizing what's happening with their own behavior, and then maybe helping them to label it from a brain-based perspective. And before I finish this point, I do want to share one more anecdote, and I'm going to have those of you who can visualize with me. I want you to close your eyes for a moment if you're not driving and that feels safe for you, or otherwise just like kind of have your eyes a little bit down and soft. I want to make sure. Okay. So listen and notice what happens in your body when you hear this story, because a mom shared this with me once. She said, Samantha, you're asking me to do special time with my kid, but I want to make sure you understand my life. I get up at 5:30 in the morning so that I can work on the treadmill for half an hour, so that I can get my 6 children up at 6 a.m., so that I can get them fed, on the bus, off to school, so that I can get errands done, appointments made, paperwork filled out, so that I can prepare snack, be ready when they're home, so that I can guide them through snack, homework, dinner, and start the bedtime routine so that everyone's in bed by 10 o'clock so that I can drop into bed exhausted only to begin again the next day. So with your eyes still closed as you're visualizing this, I want you to picture the feeling inside your body or tune into that when you hear this story. And notice a time when you've experienced that, where you in your unique life have been working so hard and all you want is for it to improve. And a well-meaning person says, well, just do this. All right, friends, open your eyes. So if you're willing to share, type in the chat box what came up for you from that experience, okay? And while you're doing that, Sonia, with your permission, if you are willing to share, what was your experience of that?
Yeah, so my initial response was like a visceral kind of like squeezing and contraction. And it was not, this is such an amazing, good experiential activity. But because I experienced like this kind of like, this person does not understand and this person doesn't get it. And that's what my experience was. Can I just do a time? Oh, and then someone's saying exhaustion here. Yeah, like it's kind of like, oh, I told the wrong person what my life is like, like they don't get it.
Right.
Well, I just want to make a quick thing. Like sometimes when you're moving, there's feedback from your mic. And so there's like a scratching or, yeah, there's something, either it's hitting your hands or your necklace. But anyway, let's get back to our experiential activity. So someone else is saying, Christine is saying, it's very relatable, meaning she's had this experience. And I feel like doubly crushed in a way, because I feel like even to my beloved family members, I've been the one to say, just do this, like I've said it to my husband or my children. And so I'm learning a lot here, and I really appreciate it, even though it's painful to know,
Mhm.
like, I've been that person saying, well, just do this.
Yes.
So yeah, this is great.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I can imagine that most people can relate to that when we're practitioners, where we come from, especially when you share that family example, right? We give advice to family because we love them.
Mhm.
And we don't know if it's like like a shot to them, or I love that you said you felt like, oh, I told the wrong person. This person doesn't understand me.
Right.
Right. And so I feel like the invitation when we're working with families is to become really skillful at how to talk to parents. Yes, you need concrete tools about supporting their child. And when you learn how to talk to parents, now you create a totally different potential for a family to thrive. It makes me think, I just had this memory of, I have a 2-year-old at home, and when he was born, we had a birth at home with a midwife in our living room in a little tub. And after 30 hours of labor, Mason emerged and he had this pain cry, just like this, like shrieky, squealy. The tone of it was so heartbreaking for me to remember even to this day. And the midwife had confirmed it down the road. She wasn't willing to say it right then, but what had happened in the 30 hours of posterior labor was he was in a position, which Sonia, I'm sure you know this in birthing, well, I'm guessing you do, where he was in a position called asynclitic. So he's kind of like turned and head cocked a little bit. And so his head bones came out overlapping. And my husband is a pediatric and neurological chiropractor. And within the first minute of Mason's life, Ty was adjusting him. But this little baby who was born and had, like, his weight was in the 86th percentile, he didn't stop crying. He did not stop crying for 3 weeks. So we were working on different things holistically. And by the by the second week of his life, when the midwife checked in on us at home, Mason had decreased in the weight percentile from 86 down to 10. And so we started doing more searching, like what's going on. And it turned out he had a posterior tongue tie. He was allergic. He wasn't drawing out enough milk from my breasts. He was allergic to some of the donor milk that we got. And so we were just on this search for like how to make sure our child could thrive, because we're in this field, like it was so important to us. And I remember one of the lactation consultants who works at a local hospital, actually, she literally came to our house and sat in my bed with me in my bathrobe that was open, to see how nursing was going at 7 a.m. on a Thursday morning before her 10-hour hospital shift of lactation consulting. Because the other thing that had happened was when I was 34 weeks pregnant, I had fallen and broken my ankle. And so I literally couldn't navigate getting out of the house, holding a baby, I couldn't navigate this when he was 2 weeks old. And so I remember her sitting on my bed and I was just crying. And she became this, it dawned on me where I was like, she said, Samantha, I am here to support you and give you some tools, and you'll still need to do the work, but I'll keep checking in on you. And I realized for the first time in my life, in my parenting life, I had been in crisis. And so this is my invitation when we're working with families, is that we understand that when families are working with us, it can seem run of the mill, like we see this all the time and we trust that it can get better. And we might take for granted how vulnerable of a situation it is. But when you become a really good guide to them, it takes the pressure off from not just you having to fix them, but them having to perform at a level so that they feel like they're doing it right and doing a good job. Like there's this flow that needs to happen in your relationship with the parents and the children as well. And so that's the other component that I wanted to share when it comes to how to talk to parents. For many years, I led this isn't right. This isn't the right view. For many years, I led a parent coach certification course that was a 6-month intensive. to certify professionals to become one-on-one parent coaches. But now what I do is I teach a 6-hour continuing education course online, really just on this 6-month program boiled down into the positive communication template. When you have this posture of how to listen to parents, what types of questions to ask, ways to acknowledge their emotions to help release some of that baggage, how to articulate what's happening in their child and in them and what to do next, championing them so that they see the small changes and progress that they are making, and then empowering them through different action items and accountability. This is the posture of becoming a guide and really seeing parents transform.
That is so great. Now, is that the main, because I know you have a course coming up, is that what you just showed us, that is the content of the course, the 6-hour course?
It is, it's part of it. So the 6-hour course is about the 3 essential skills to talk to parents. So in the course, you as a practitioner learn the top 3 behavior skills you need to know that are most often missing in parents' dynamics when they have a challenging kid. So behavior tactics, this positive communication template, and then we do role play and practice during the course because it's online, and so we can do it in Zoom breakout rooms. There's actual practice so that you get good at these skills and you feel ready to have that first conversation with a family who's been stuck.
That sounds fabulous. I love the experiential pieces that you built into it.
Yeah.
Someone saying what was after champion, and that was empower, right?
Empower, yep. So this is how do we empower them where they take responsibility, and we provide accountability to them by checking in.
Yeah, great. Well, I'm really excited to hear about questions from everyone. If you have questions, you can type them in the chat box right now. But one last question is, what is one thing you want listeners to walk away with after our conversation today?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So, and before I answer that, Sonia, if you have a link to that online continuing education class,
Oh,
do
right.
you have a link you want to share about
I
that?
do.
We don't want anybody to feel like you're not invited. You're certainly invited. I teach it twice a year and it's coming up on September 30th. So if you want to sign up for that course, registration is open now. And you get 6 clock hours. So you can submit it to your licensing board. And we've had OTs and educators and therapists and social workers and such foster parents get approved by submitting these documents.
Okay, great. So the link is in the chat box.
Okay, and I don't see it. You might want to hit return so it sends.
Oh, okay. Let me try it again.
Cool.
Oh, you know what? Maybe I'm sending it not to everyone. That's funny.
Mm-hmm.
How do I send to everyone? I'll figure this out.
Yep, I think I might have found this link for you. So if people want to check out the class, you are invited. And so the other thing is, for answering what I hope people walk away with from our conversation, for those of you who have a question handy, I want you to ask your questions. We have 25 minutes if you want to have a conversation about something. So you can hover over the reactions on the bottom of your screen here, and then it can raise your hand and put you in the queue so that we can unmute you and you can ask a question. Or if you don't feel comfortable asking a verbal question, then just post in the chat box. But we don't have any more prepared content, so we're happy to talk to you. That's the beauty of having a webinar like this.
Well, I have a question too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Now, I know you offer your trainings. Do you also work one-on-one with clients, with parents, with professionals? How are you set up to work with people?
Yeah, I do. I have really 2 audiences of people that I'm passionate about. So I do this 1-day training with professionals a couple times a year, or like schools will hire me to come in and train their staff.
Oh, wonderful.
And then I am super passionate about working with parents still. So I work with a handful of one-on-one parents every single week. And then I teach an 8-week, the Mad to Glad Blueprint is an 8-week parent training on brain-based tools that they can use to start seeing change and creating more peace at home. So I teach that starting in October. And so a handful of one-on-ones, and then that live group program twice a year as well.
That sounds so great. And I love the fact that there are schools that are hiring you, because I think when you can get a whole staff doing this, it probably just uplifts everything. When the whole, like a whole group of souls know, like, oh, okay, we've got these skills now. I think it probably just really changes the whole culture, um, and is probably so healing and helpful.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Let me just see if I think I'm seeing the chat. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions at this point.
All right. Well, I'll answer your question. It kind of felt like a teaser because you asked it a few minutes ago already. So the thing that I'm hoping listeners walk away with from our conversation today is that together we can help parents better help their kids. And the progress is quicker than you might expect. So families who have emotionally intense children usually see change when they learn the first two pillars of the MAD to GLAD blueprint. And I see Mary asking the question. So it's spelled out MAD to GLAD blueprint.com. So together we can help parents. And sometimes when we've been stuck in a rut, it can feel like, if you're that practitioner who feels like, oh, we've been in this plateau and I've already tried all of these different things. Or if you're the parent feeling that way, we've seen these different professionals, it's taking a long time. When you start adding in the second leg of the stool, you've got some body-based support for your child. There's a parenting aspect. And then oftentimes when parents have an intense child, there's usually a third leg of the stool. Sometimes for parents, would you have a guess of what that third support leg might be? Sonia, what do you see a lot that families need?
So go through the first two legs for me.
Yep.
To
So some type of body work or body movement, some sort of healing movements for the child's nervous system. So this
Okay.
could be rhythmic movements, reflex integration,
Mhm.
OT, neurological chiropractic. So I usually see that there's a body category.
Yeah.
I see that there's a parenting category. And then what do you see with families who are feeling stuck and contentious? What tends to be a good third resource for them?
So the first thing that comes to my mind, like if you're including diet and nutrition in the body category, then what comes to my mind would be play, like getting back to like play and enjoyment together. Because one of the things that play does, that I've experienced and seen, is that it gives us more joy, which in itself tells the nervous system I'm safe. And I love your precious story about the parent, where you could tell the parent to be, okay, this is hard. I'm going to breathe. I'm safe. And it's like, wow, that almost makes me cry. It's like, oh, that's so important, because we all get the fire in our brain, when we're in these intense situations. So I think play and safety and those kinds of things will help the love flow, and
Mhm.
the connection and the tenderness, which are all the things we all really long for.
Yes, yes, I love that.
Mhm.
And I loved how you were thinking about that. And those of you who are listening, feel free to type in the chat box what you see might be another support service for families who have more emotionally intense
Mhm.
kids. I see something similar where, sometimes the body category feels like a three-legged stool itself, because you've got the
Right.
nervous system approach, you've got the nutrition approach, you
Right.
might have homeopathy or something gentle. But then
Mhm.
there's also that emotional support category that could be play, counseling, spiritual guidance, something like that, marriage support.
Mhm.
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 Great. All right, friends. Well, we don't want to hang on to anybody who feels like they want to hop off. So if you have a question or a comment, I see some people that I recognize. I'd love to hear your reflection on how this is relevant to the work that you're doing today, or if a question comes up or just a share comes up. We love to hear other voices. It's not every day we get to get a couple, Sonia and I in the same room where we both get to field your comments and questions.
Well, I'll go for one other question. Like, tell us about, like you told us earlier about Drew and his dad and things like that. Tell us another story of a family or a child that, or parents that benefited, or a professional that benefited from one of your courses or one of your
Yeah.
one-on-one clients. We love stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Let me ask for feedback. What kind of a story do people want to hear? So if you want an ADHD story, or, when it comes to practitioners, in about 5 years of me doing the parent coach certification, I trained 55 different professionals to be able to do one-on-one coaching and run parents through the Magic Lad Blueprint principles. And what I remember was one of the occupational therapists in particular, she said what happened when she learned these skills of how to talk to parents is she said, oh my gosh, now everybody who comes in the door, I realize how much I actually just want to do full-time parent coaching and have the clinic do the hands-on work with the kids. Because
Wow.
when you have the tools to talk to parents, if you think about it, there's not there's not oftentimes a place that just supports the parents,
Oh, I
right?
know.
There's
Mhm.
counselors for the family, for the parent and the child, for the couples, but the space just for the parents can be really valuable. So I remember one of the coaches saying that. And
And
then,
then you're
oh yeah,
seeing the ADHD requests?
I
Okay,
do, I
super.
do. Yep, I see your request. So um, I'm thinking of a family who actually lived here in Minnesota. So before I did everything virtually, they would come into my office in St. Paul, Minnesota. And the parents had 3 children, and I never work directly with the children. In fact, I don't meet them anymore. That's the first question people ask, like, should I send you videos? Are you going to do a home visit? I'm like, nope, don't need to. Tell me about what's happening behaviorally with your child. I'm going to ask you really personal questions about how you react and how you respond. And then I'll be able to tell where each of you is stuck in terms of like brain or parenting tools. And that can be the starting place for us to begin building a plan for more peace. And so this mom she was the mother, and the way that obviously she's the mother. When she came to see me, she said, my 9-year-old has ADHD. My 6-year-old has sensory issues and ADHD. And my 4-year-old probably has ADHD. We're just waiting for a diagnosis because he's so energetic. I was like, okay. So what are some of the challenges that you're experiencing? And she said, well, the 4-year-old's really aggressive. And like, it's hard enough to have 2 boys with ADHD. There's a lot of high energy in our family, but luckily we're sports fans. So we get them outside a lot and we engage them and we play with them. So those practices were really there. But this 4-year-old's really violent and aggressive. And so I'm not sure what it is that we need to do next. If we try any discipline strategies like we've learned, they're either too soft, like we're just supposed to stay there with him and try not to let him hit us, but that's impossible if we're sitting right next to him. Or there's other firmer strategies that say put him in his room, but if we do that, he like scratches the walls and like puts dents in the door. And mom had a lot of anxiety herself, and she said, I'm afraid he's gonna like grab onto the fan on a ceiling and pull it off because he just looks like this wild animal who's trapped in a cage. And so when we started working together, this family needed what the majority of families need from the Magic Lad Blueprint. There's like 3 pillars of parenting that most families need. So number one was, and we'll talk about this in the September 30th class, was we talked a lot about how it is she was feeling about her child before even saying like, well, just stay calm because of mirror neurons. And if you're calm, then your child's going to be calm. It was more in depth. It was more like, okay, so you're having more of a flight response with this anxiety. And so if you're parent from this fear-based perspective, I asked her questions like, how does that turn out? And then I said, and so what if you parent from a really soft perspective where you're calm versus like a really aggressive perspective? And so when we started exploring the different spectrum of how she could respond, she self-selected. She said, I know that just sitting there outside his door is not going to work for our family. I also know that having a really hard limit isn't going to work for him because he's like a wild animal in the cage. So what I need to do, and she came up with a technique that she needed to be calm, which involves hands-on touch with him. which previously they hadn't done because in her marriage, she had gotten pushback, like, you're coddling our 4-year-old, that's too gentle. It's like, yeah, but sometimes wild animals need a container so that they can feel safe. And so within a couple of weeks of doing this, her child would say things like, Mom, I need you to hold me. Mom, I need you to hold me. Mom, I need you to hold me, instead of the
Wow.
violence and the aggression. Now, I did promise, I said I can remember the top 3 things that they needed. The second thing was, even though they played sports together, they were missing one of the pillars that I talk about that's called happy chemicals. So when a child has more fight or flight stress response in the brain, if you start practicing calm, the scientist in the brain is looking for escalation because it's homeostasis and familiar, and it gives a false sense of safety. I know what this is like. I can predict this. I know what this is like. So I'm going to engage you up here. So you can't just teach a parent to be calm. You also have to teach them how to elicit the opposite chemistry, the happy chemicals. So what creates oxytocin and dopamine? And like many moms, she said, when we started talking about that 15 minutes of special time, I thought I was spending quality time with him, but I'm really just running around the house getting everything done. I'm in the house with him 6 hours a day, but it's not things where we laugh together and really enjoy time together. So that was the second one. So calm, happy chemicals. And then the third one was understanding that when he was having big emotions, that's the right brain. So the emotional brain was getting really stuck and ruling the show. And she was responding with very left brain adult language. So we do have to go right now. You can't throw your shoes, because if you do, you're going to be late for baseball practice. And if you're late, you're going to be embarrassed because your coach is going to say something. And then when we get back into practice after the car, you're going to yell at me, which means then you're not going to earn ice cream on the way home. So taking a breath, helping mom recognize this isn't your child just digging in his heels and being defiant. When you're asking him to put his shoes on, for him, there was a lot of things that felt unfair to him. So she learned how to meet him in that emotional brain, like, this feels unfair. Did that mean he put his shoes on right away and walked out the door? No. But we worked through that process together. And I checked in on them. They graduated maybe, let's see, I've had a 2-year-old. So they graduated before he was born. So it's been 2.5 years, and I had checked in just a few months ago. And she said, yeah, you wouldn't believe it. He's doing great at school. We still feel like the tools that we learned apply. So much of it is, if I'm doing my self-care so that I can show up calm, connected in playtime, and I can recognize emotions rather than bypassing it and saying, like, suck it up, we got to go. She's like, I think I'm going to be doing this for the rest of his childhood and our lives together. I said, yep, you probably will. Because when you have the right parenting tools that calm fire in the brain, that are relationship based, you don't need 100 tools, friends. Like, most families need 3 to 5 tools, and they work that into their pattern, and they see a lot of success. That was a long story.
Wow, that's a beautiful story. I appreciate that so much. And I just want to dovetail into a comment that Ginny is leaving. She's saying that I start with my parents explaining that their child isn't acting the way they are because they want to be mean to the parents, but that's a communication that they're struggling. So I totally appreciate that comment. And then Ginny's also adding on, so many times some of our parents' goal is to win the fight instead of assist their child that is really in need of assistance. And I think the story that you just told, Samantha, kind of speaks to that, because the real win is when we can connect and communicate and enjoy each other in a relationship that is nurturing to both the parent and the child. So if a parent, because a parent doesn't really want to win, they just want things to be easier. I mean, because parents are so stressed, I've been there myself. You just want, you're just like, you may not have the skills, or you're in fight or flight yourself, or that kind of thing. So I think parents really don't want to win, even though their behavior might be leading them into what they don't want. I mean, I know I did that, because like, I could even be like making mistakes with my kids, going, I know this is a mistake, but I don't know what else to do, and it was so frustrating. And then, the real win that I think all parents really want is to connect in a loving way with their children and see them thrive. So I know you have more because you're the expert on this one. So tell me what you're thinking about this.
Yeah, well, what it makes me think of, and Ginny, thank you for making that comment. It's nice to see you again here today. Yeah, it really makes me think of, there's a certain point in our work, and there's phases where we can feel really compassionate towards parents, and there's phases where we kind of brush it under the rug, like, oh, every day, day in, day out, and we're not able to be as compassionate. Like, we still have to grow that muscle sometimes. And so it makes me think of how rewarding it is, Sonia, what you just shared, like that evolved perspective. Like, you're on the right track with families, not just because, I should speak for myself. I know I'm on the right track with families, not just because their child calms down more quickly, or because this approach finally works for them, but because they say things like a mom said to me today, I don't dread driving up my driveway anymore. I'm happy to walk inside and see how my kid's doing.
Wow.
And it's like, yes, you didn't just give parents great tools, you helped them decrease some baggage of old control patterns, and I don't want to get too advanced here because I work a lot on like thinking patterns and subconscious programming and things like that. But it's like, when you practice the positive communication template of reading between the lines, learning how to ask questions that guide parents into their own goals, so that they say things like, I want to enjoy the time I spend with my kid. And then you have maybe the right order of strategies that the parent can follow, so that they start seeing changes and they can see it all the way through, compared to like, I read this book and I tried this technique and it was good for a week, but then it stopped working. It's like, no, you got stuck and you didn't make it to the finish line. And so when you work with somebody who understands how to get you to the finish line of having your 3 to 5 go-to parenting tools, wow, then they can focus on nutrition and reflex integration, and there's not like a first then. It's sometimes simultaneously, but sometimes it's down the road. Then you unfold the next layer.
Well, that is so beautiful and uplifting. I really thank you, and thanks to all the ones who are listening. And I think I don't see further questions. So it sounds like we're really complete. I love the stories that you shared. Truly uplifting and wonderful. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for hosting, and everybody, thank you for joining us today. So if you wanted to check out any of those programs, we'll send a replay or the recording out. Oh, I see Susan raising a hand. Look at that, right in the final moment. If somebody's ready to go, if their hand was on the end button, you can head out. Susan, we can help you unmute.
I'm just saying thank you.
Oh, okay, got it. You're welcome.
Thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye, thank you. I love that. So we'll send this recording out within the next week or so. There will be the link to this talk, as well as a conversation Sonia and I had featuring her work on neurodevelopmental movements that we had yesterday. And have a beautiful night. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Sonia.
Thank you all. Greetings.